3:12 p.m. April 21st, 1952. The courtroom air smells like old paper and cold coffee. A ceiling fan turns lazily above the judge's bench, pushing the same stale heat in circles. Benches creak under bodies that have learned to sit still when the law is watching. A bailiff leans against the wall, bored, twirling a key ring like nothing in this room could ever surprise him. Thomas Johnson stands at the defense table with his hands empty and his mouth closed. 22 years old. Harlem born. Shoulders straight. Eyes forward. He wears a jacket that looks borrowed, because it is. He was grabbed so fast he didn't have time to dress like a man facing a judge. The prosecutor doesn't bother with drama. He doesn't need it. He has the advantage built into the room. Judge Harrison Blackwell sits above them all, black robe draped like authority, face pale and unreadable. He glances at the clock, irritated, like this case is a chore between more important matters. His gavel lies within reach like a weapon that never leaves fingerprints. Thomas looks toward the gallery. No family. No lawyer. Just strangers and silence. The clerk reads a charge that sounds harmless when spoken aloud. Loitering. Standing outside a store in a white neighborhood. A crime so small it should dissolve in daylight. Judge Blackwell leans forward, eyes narrowing as if he can see guilt on skin. Judge Blackwell. You have counsel. Thomas's throat moves. His voice comes out steady anyway. Thomas. No, sir. The judge's lips tighten, almost pleased. Judge Blackwell. You waived it. Thomas blinks. I didn't. Judge Blackwell raises a hand. The bailiff shifts slightly, a subtle warning. The room's balance is clear now. The rules will be whatever the bench decides they are. The prosecutor speaks for less than 2 minutes. No witnesses. No evidence. No store owner testifying. No security footage. Nothing but assumption presented like fact. Judge Blackwell looks down at Thomas as if he's reading a pre-written script. Judge Blackwell. This court is tired of your kind treating decency as optional. Thomas's fingers curl once, then relax. He breathes slow. He knows anger in this room is a trap. Judge Blackwell. 10 years. A murmur ripples through the gallery and dies instantly. 10 years for standing on a sidewalk. 10 years for existing in the wrong zip code. Thomas's eyes widen. He tries to speak. Thomas. Your Honor. Judge Blackwell cuts him off with a sharp tap of the gavel. Judge Blackwell. Hard labor. The words land like chains. The bailiff moves. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut is crisp, final, like punctuation on a life. Thomas turns his head once more toward the benches, searching for someone to meet his eyes, someone to confirm this is real. No one does. Because in this room, eye contact is a liability. At 3:20 p.m., 8 minutes after the hearing begins, Thomas is led out a side door and down a corridor that smells like bleach and fear. And before the courthouse steps even cool, a paperwork machine begins moving him out of New York like he's freight. By nightfall, Thomas is on a train headed south. Toward a place where hard labor isn't a sentence. It's a business model. Toward Alabama. Toward a camp that will work him 16 hours a day and call it justice. And in Harlem, the man who loves him like a son hasn't heard yet. But he will. And when Bumpy Johnson hears what Judge Blackwell sold his nephew into, he doesn't reach for a gun. He reaches for something the judge has never faced. Consequences that don't require violence. Consequences that require exposure. Consequences that make a powerful man run. At 7:44 p.m., Bumpy sits in a back booth at a Harlem club with a book open beside a glass he isn't drinking from. The club is loud in the front, laughter and jazz and money changing hands. In the back, it's quiet. Business happens where the music can't reach. A runner arrives, breathless, as if he sprinted through the whole neighborhood. Runner. They took Thomas. Bumpy's eyes lift. Nothing else moves. Bumpy. Where? Runner. Downtown. Loitering charge. Judge Blackwell. 10 years hard labor. For a moment, The noise in the club turns distant. Not because it changed. Because Bumpy's mind closed the door on it. 10 years. For loitering. That's not a sentence. That's a transaction. Bumpy's face stays calm, but his fingers tighten around the edge of the booth until the wood complains. Bumpy. No lawyer. Runner shakes his head. No time. 8 minutes. Bumpy exhales once, controlled. He doesn't swear. He doesn't shout. He doesn't perform anger for an audience. He stands. Bumpy. Find me the paperwork. Runner. What paperwork? Bumpy's voice drops. Bumpy. The kind that makes a man rich when a boy gets chained. Bumpy leaves the club and Harlem's cold air hits him like a slap. Cars move slow. Streetlights shimmer in puddles. A patrol car rolls by and doesn't stop. Tonight the city thinks it won. Bumpy walks with purpose through it anyway. Thomas isn't just family. Thomas is proof of Bumpy's one soft spot. Bumpy's sister's boy. The kid who used to carry groceries for old ladies on 132nd. The kid who read books because Bumpy put them in his hands. The kid who said he wanted to be a teacher one day because somebody gotta teach us how to fight without dying. Bumpy remembers Thomas at 13, sitting on the stoop, counting passing cars, asking questions about a world that never answered cleanly. Thomas. Uncle Bumpy, why they hate us? Bumpy had shrugged like it didn't matter. Like the answer didn't have teeth. Bumpy. Because they scared of what we become if we stop bowing. Now Thomas is on a train to a chain gang. Not for what he did. For what someone decided he could be sold as. Bumpy doesn't have time for grief. He has time for math. How fast does a prisoner transfer complete? How far can a judge's reach extend? How many people have to get involved for a loitering case to become interstate labor? He knows the answer before anyone confirms it. A lot. Which means a lot of weak points. That night, Bumpy activates his network the way he always does when the official system turns predatory. He doesn't start with the judge. He starts with the pattern. By 10:18 p.m., Bumpy's people are pulling court dockets. Who got sentenced to labor? How many? How often? Which judge? Which officers made arrests? Which prosecutors pushed cases? Which paperwork moved fastest? The numbers are ugly. Black defendants. Minor charges. Major sentences. A conveyor belt. And always the same signature near the top. Judge Harrison Blackwell. By morning, Bumpy has a name for what it is. Not racism alone. Racism is the excuse. This is trafficking. Human bodies converted into invoices. Bumpy meets an honest clerk in a diner at 6:32 a.m., a woman with tired eyes who has learned how to pretend she doesn't see what she sees. She slides a folded paper across the table without meeting his gaze. Clerk. They don't just sentence them. They transfer them fast. Like they're expected. Bumpy opens the paper. His eyes move quickly. Dates. Case numbers. Names. Too many names. Bumpy. Why? The clerk finally looks up. Her voice is barely there. Clerk. There's a private labor camp. Out of state. Construction contracts. They pay per head. Bumpy's jaw tightens. Bumpy. How much? She swallows. $500. $500 per black man sent south. A man becomes a receipt. A life becomes a line item. Bumpy sits back and feels something cold settle inside him. Not rage. Clarity. Because he understands the second part now. If the judge is getting paid, the judge has partners. No one moves bodies across state lines alone. Bumpy's next move is not violent. It's forensic. He sends men to follow the money. Women to listen to conversations at charity events. A quiet lawyer he trusts to request records in ways that don't raise alarms. A journalist with a conscience who owes Bumpy a favor from years earlier. Within 48 hours, the conspiracy begins to show its skeleton. Judge Blackwell is not an isolated monster. He's a gatekeeper in a profitable pipeline. A prison warden signs transfers like he's signing checks. A police captain assigns the loitering sweeps and makes sure the right defendants land in the right courtroom. 3 businessmen fund the labor contracts and then hire construction crews that don't get paid because the men building the foundation are chained. Over 5 years, more than 200 black men vanish into the system. 12 die in camps. Ruled. Accidents. Heat stroke. Falls. Infection. Paperwork always cleans the blood. Bumpy stands in a Harlem apartment at 2:41 a.m. with a chalkboard propped against the wall, lines drawn like a war map. Names. Dates. Money. He points at one line. Thomas. Transfer completion within 72 hours. After that, Thomas becomes property in practice, even if law pretends otherwise. Bumpy's voice stays low. Bumpy, we have 3 days. One of his men shifts uneasily. We can't reach Alabama in 3 days. Bumpy taps the board. We don't have to reach Alabama. He points again. Train. Transfers don't teleport. They move through rails. They move through schedules. They move through predictable choke points. Then he pauses. And makes the decision that defines the whole story. He will not solve this with murder. Not because he's above it. Because killing the judge would turn the pipeline invisible again. Another judge would replace him. Another signature would keep the conveyor belt running. Bumpy wants the machine to break in public. He wants the judge humiliated, exposed, hunted by the same system he abused. He wants the judge to lose everything while alive enough to feel it. True power is destroying an enemy without violence. But first, Thomas has to come home. Bumpy's extraction plan is surgical, not cinematic. No shootout on a bridge. No masked raid with a dozen guns. That's how stories get you arrested and get innocent people killed. Bumpy uses the one weapon that terrifies corrupt officials almost as much as bullets. Visibility. He calls a federal contact he's used before, a man who doesn't like Bumpy but likes evidence more. He calls the journalist, and gives him just enough to make him hungry. He calls the honest lawyer, and tells him to file what needs filing immediately. Habeas. Emergency motion. Injunction. Words that sound boring until you realize they can stop a train. At 11:06 p.m., Bumpy's lawyer is in a courthouse hallway, paperwork in hand, moving like a man chasing a fire. A clerk tries to stall him. He pushes past. A judge on night duty raises an eyebrow. The lawyer speaks fast. Lawyer. We have an unlawful denial of counsel, an excessive sentence, and credible evidence of a trafficking conspiracy. If you don't sign an emergency hold, you're going to be explaining to the feds why a citizen disappeared across state lines after an 8-minute trial. The night judge hesitates. Not from moral clarity. From self-preservation. He signs. At 1:38 a.m., a telegram hits a rail office. Transfer pending review. Hold prisoner. At 3:02 a.m., a prison transport supervisor curses, because paperwork is now risky. Risky means delays. Delays mean eyes. Eyes mean journalists. Journalists mean careers end. Thomas's train doesn't stop forever. It stops long enough. Long enough for the next part. Bumpy's people aren't on the tracks with guns. They're at the station with documents and witnesses and a federal man who doesn't smile. At 5:49 a.m., a federal agent steps onto the platform where the transport is scheduled to pass through. He holds up a badge that outranks local corruption. Agent. Transfers held. A guard argues. A supervisor protests. Everyone tries to push the problem downward, like always. The agent doesn't move. Agent. If you move him, you're obstructing. Words have weight when they come from the right mouth. Thomas is brought off the train and into a holding room that smells like sweat and metal. He's thinner already. His wrists bear the first marks. His eyes are hard in a way they weren't a week ago. He looks up and sees Bumpy. For a second, Thomas thinks he's hallucinating. Thomas. Uncle Bumpy? Bumpy steps forward. His voice stays calm, Because if he lets emotion in, it might flood the room. Bumpy, you coming home? Thomas's throat works. His voice comes out rough. Thomas, they said I was going to Alabama. Bumpy's eyes narrow. They said a lot? Thomas tries to stand straight. His body complains. Bumpy notices and stores the detail. Because every bruise is a receipt. They get Thomas back to Harlem by nightfall. Quietly. Without headlines yet. The headlines are coming, but Bumpy is timing them. A doctor examines Thomas in a back office. Early signs of abuse. Underfed. Dehydrated. Bruises in places that aren't accidental. Thomas sits on a cot and stares at his hands like he's surprised they still belong to him. Bumpy sits nearby, silent. Thomas finally speaks, voice low. Thomas. All that, for standing outside a store. Bumpy doesn't answer immediately. He looks at Thomas, and sees his mother's face in him. Sees his own younger self. Sees the city's cruelty repeating. Bumpy. No. Not for standing. He leans in slightly. Bumpy. For being sellable. That line becomes Thomas's education. The kind no college teaches. Now comes the second half of Bumpy's plan. Destroy the judge's life in public. Not with a bullet. With a file. Bumpy's team compiles everything. Bank statements showing deposits timed to sentencing spikes. Recorded conversations obtained through informants, not magic. Men talking too freely in bars, in back rooms, in cars they believed were private. Transfer logs. Payment ledgers. Contracts between construction companies and labor providers. Names of the partners. 200 defendants. 12 dead. And Thomas's case. Page 7. Bumpy doesn't just want to expose. He wants to force the judge to face the evidence in the only place the judge feels like a god. The courtroom. A week later, Judge Blackwell sits in his regular session, moving cases like he's stamping mail. A black defendant stands before him on another minor charge. Same pattern. Same contempt. The courtroom is crowded in a way it usually isn't. Reporters in the back with notebooks out. Honest lawyers standing along the wall. Harlem residents filling benches with faces like stone. Then the doors open. Bumpy Johnson walks in. He doesn't storm. He doesn't shout. He walks with the steady pace of a man entering a room he already owns psychologically. Behind him, men file in. Not armed. Not masked. Freed prisoners. Dozens of them. Faces Harlem recognizes. Men who vanished and returned. Men with scars and hollow eyes. Men who carry the truth in their posture. The room changes temperature. Judge Blackwell's eyes lift and lock on Bumpy. For the first time, the judge looks like a man who recognizes a predator. Bumpy approaches the bench and sets a briefcase down on the wood with a soft thud. The sound is small. The effect is not. Blackwell's mouth tightens. You can't. Bumpy doesn't speak yet. He opens the briefcase and turns it so the judge can see. Documents. Copies. Ledgers. Bank statements. Transfer logs. Contracts. Photographs. The entire skeleton of the machine laid out in paper. Judge Blackwell's face strains of color. He reaches for the bailiffs with his eyes. They don't move. Not because they're paid off, in some comic book way. Because the room is full of reporters and honest lawyers and federal eyes now. Moving wrong in this moment would become a career-ending photograph. Judge Blackwell's throat works. He tries to regain authority with volume. Judge Blackwell. Remove these people. No one moves. Bumpy finally speaks. Only one sentence, calm enough to cut. Bumpy. Read page 7. That's my nephew. You have 60 seconds to resign. A murmur ripples through the courtroom like wine through dry leaves. The judge's fingers tremble as he flips pages. He finds it. Thomas's name. The sentence. The transfer order. The payment entry. A perfect paper trail of evil. Judge Blackwell stammers. This is fabricated. Bumpy's eyes don't change. Bumpy. 55. The judge blinks. What? Bumpy. 54. The countdown is quiet. No theatrics. But it locks the room into a single rhythm. Each number is a footstep toward collapse. Judge Blackwell looks around wildly, searching for an ally. He finds none. Because allies disappear when cameras appear. Bumpy keeps counting. 48. The judge's breathing becomes visible. His shoulders rise and fall too fast. 42. The prosecutor at the side table looks down at his notes, like he's never seen them before. 36. A reporter scribbles so fast the pencil nearly snaps. 28. Judge Blackwell's voice cracks. You can't extort a judge. Bumpy doesn't flinch. Bumpy. I'm not extorting you. I'm documenting you. 20. Blackwell's face twitches. He stands abruptly, robe shifting like a startled bird. 15. He tries to speak again, but the words won't form correctly, because the room has already decided what he is. A trafficker. A seller of bodies. 10. The judge looks toward the back exit behind the bench. A private door. The judge's escape hatch. 8. His hand reaches for the edge of the bench like he might steady himself. 6. His eyes meet Bumpy's for a fraction of a second, and in that fraction you can see it. Fear. Not fear of death. Fear of exposure. Fear of being seen without the robe. Fear of being stripped. 3. Judge Blackwell turns. 2. He runs. He flees through the back door like a man who suddenly remembers he has legs. The robe flares behind him. Papers on the bench flutter from the movement. The courtroom holds a collective breath. Then it breaks into chaos. Not violence. Noise. Voices. Reporters bolting for the exit. Camera shutters snapping. Outside, photographers catch him. A judge running. A symbol collapsing. Those photos circulate within hours. Not as rumor. As proof. Bumpy doesn't chase. He doesn't need to. Because he understands the real chase has already begun. The legal one. The federal one. The one that follows money and contracts and signatures. Bumpy's briefcase doesn't leave the courthouse with him. It goes to the FBI through his federal contact. 2 days later, the machine collapses on paper the same way it collapsed in the room. Judge Blackwell's assets freeze. An arrest warrant issues. The warden gets arrested. The police captain gets fired. The businessmen get investigated. And Judge Blackwell does what men do when they finally become the hunted. He flees. Georgia. A small town where nobody knows his face yet. Where he tells himself he can start over. But he can't start over from a photograph. He can't start over from a federal file. He can't start over when the kind of people he partnered with don't like loose ends. He lives in hiding. Bankrupt. Disbarred. His name becomes poison in legal circles. And in Harlem, Thomas's name is cleared. Charges expunged. Compensation paid by the state that pretends money can repair stolen years. The other prisoners are tracked down, one by one, through church networks, community groups, legal aid, and the same Harlem information web that always worked better than official systems. Restitution comes slowly. Some men are too broken to spend it. Some are angry enough to set it on fire just to prove they can. Bumpy funds a legal defense organization for the wrongly accused. Quietly. No plaque. No speech. He doesn't do it because he believes in the law. He does it because he understands something the judge never did. Systems don't break once. They break forever unless someone builds something stronger. Years pass. Thomas heals. Not quickly. Not completely. But he heals in the way survivors do when they're given time and support instead of more punishment. He goes to college on tuition Bumpy pays without making it a story. On graduation day, the auditorium smells like fresh paper programs and cheap cologne. Families clap too loudly because they're celebrating more than a diploma. They're celebrating survival. They're celebrating a future the system tried to sell. Thomas walks across the stage in a cap and gown, face composed, hands steady. He receives the diploma and looks out into the crowd. He finds Bumpy. Bumpy sits near the back, hat in his lap, suit pressed, posture still. He doesn't clap loudly. He doesn't stand. He doesn't perform pride. But his mouth curves. A rare smile. Small. Real. Thomas holds the diploma tighter, like it's proof that some chains don't hold forever. And somewhere in Georgia, Judge Harrison Blackwell wakes up every morning and checks the window before he opens the door. He listens for cars that idle too long. He flinches at footsteps he can't identify. He isn't haunted by God. He's haunted by paper. By names. By a courtroom full of witnesses. By the moment he ran. Because Bumpy didn't destroy him with violence. Bumpy destroyed him with visibility. Was it justice? Or was it power wearing a better mask? When the law sells you, and the law refuses to save you, what is a man allowed to do to survive? What is a community allowed to do to stay human? If this story made you think about how corruption hides in plain sight, and how accountability can be more terrifying than bullets, hit subscribe. We're not glorifying crime. We're examining what happens when systems fail and people build consequences anyway. In the comments, answer this. If you had 60 seconds to make a corrupt judge face what he did, would you choose violence? Or would you choose the kind of truth that makes him run? Remember Thomas Johnson. 22 years old in 1952. Stolen for standing still. Returned because somebody refused to accept paperwork as destiny. Rest in power while you're still living. 3:12 p.m. The fan still turns in that courtroom somewhere. But now, every time it pushes air across the bench, it pushes the memory of a judge who ran from his own record.